Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, which is SUKKAH Daf Tes. We begin right on top at the Mishnah. SUKKAH Yishana, an old SUKKAH, a SUKKAH which was built more than 30 days before Sukkot. And the fellow who built it did not explicitly say that he's doing it l'shem Sukkot. Beishamai Poislin, they say the SUKKAH is puzzle. Because just as the SUKKAH has to be l'shem tzel, as we learned yesterday, for the sake of providing shelter, creating shade rather than a storage area or an ordinary dwelling, say Beishamai, need to have l'shem mitzvah SUKKAH. Ubeis Hillel machshirin, say even the SUKKAH is kosher, you don't need lishma when you make that SUKKAH. Ve'ezeh hi SUKKAH yishana, what is considered an old SUKKAH that we're discussing here? Kol she'asa kaidem l'chag shloshim yom, which was built more than 30 days before Yom Tov. Rashi will explain for us, because within that 30-day period, which is the time when they are shoyel behilchas hachag, we learn this from a pasuk, Mesachas Pesachim, it's the zman hachana before the Yom Tov. It's that preparatory period, in which case anything within it is by default presumed to be in preparation for the upcoming Yom Tov. In which case all agree, even Beis Shammai would consider this sukkah to be kosher, because we say the stam asiyah of the sukkah is l'shem sukkahs. So again, if we're speaking before 30 days and there was no intent, there was no kavanah l'shem sukkah, Beis Shammai Poislan, they say you have to say l'shem mitzvah sukkah while building that sukkah. Whereas according to Beis Hillel, there's no need to have l'shma by the asiyah of the sukkah. Continues the Mishnah. Avalim also l'shem chag, but suppose he specifically did it l'shem sukkahs, then it's irrelevant how much time before Yom Tov it is. Even if it's beginning of the year, meaning a year ago, it's still a year before Yom Tov. If it's l'shem sukkah, that's fine. Let's go over to Rashi on top. SUKKAH Yishana ked mefarish she'asa koidem l'chag shloshim yom. It was built 30 days or more before Yom Tov. V'lo pireish shehi l'shem chag. And he didn't express his intention. Some Mefarshim learn that Rashi means you have to actually say l'shem chag. So since the timing doesn't really relate to Yom Tov, it's more than 30 days before Yom Tov, and he didn't say I'm doing it l'shem Yom Tov, we don't have a sukkah l'shma, b'shamay poislan. The boat was sukkah l'shma. It needs to be done for the sake of the mitzvah use. V'zu stam na'asis. Says Rashi, v'ilu tech shleishim l'chag. But within 30 days of Yom Tov, Havel would have been within 30 days. Given the shoylim b'ilchas achag, kaidum l'chag shleishim yom. Since that's the time you went to begin discussing, preparing the halachas of Yom Tov, stama oisa l'shem chag hu oisa. We assume by default that whenever one builds a sukkah at that time, it's meant for Yom Tov. You don't have to actually say that. Aval kaidum shleishim stam lav l'chag. But if it's before 30 days, then it's not presumed to be for the sake of sukkahs, unless you actually say it. Ubesil machshirin, why? The loy ba'in and sukkah l'shem chag. There's no makar to require l'shma by a sukkah. But, says the Mishnah, if he did it l'shem chag, and even if it's a year before Yom Tov, it's kosher. Ksheira l'beishami itzrich, even Beishami would agree that it's okay. Taisus brings from the Yerushalmi that even according to Beis Hillel, you still have to be mechadesh b'davar. So if it wasn't done l'shma, refresh it a bit, l'shem Yom Tov. Some say lift a tefach and put it down. Some say even a kol shu across the sukkah. And the Farshim explained the reason for this is because at the end of the day you want to use it for a mitzvah, and it's ro'oi. It's appropriate that the sukkah should have been prepared at least in some fashion for the sake of the mitzvah. Some explain the point is that it shouldn't appear like an ordinary dwelling, in which case it might lead a person to use a house, or a sukkah which was intended for year-round use. Therefore, do some sort of chiddush to indicate, no, this is l'shem sukkah. But it appears that this Yerushalmi is only a derabbanan, because min ha-Torah, as we're going to see in the Gemara, Beis Hillel do not require any l'shma by a sukkah. So to summarize, we had three cases. If he did it l'shem sukkah, it's irrelevant whether it's a month, a half a year, or even a year before Sukkot, all agree it's kosher. If it's within 30 days, which is the zman of sheilin v'hilchas achag, then all agree even stama is good. Interesting that this concept of shleishim yom will benefit even a din Torah, because Beis Shammai require lishma min ha-Torah. We're going to learn it from a pasuk. The fact that it's within 30 days. It's a zman of achana. You meant to start learning and discussing the halachas of Yom Tov. Because of that, we consider anything done within that time, we consider it connected and related and attributed to the Yom Tov. If it's before 30 days, we have machlekes. Beis Shammai say you need to have it l'shem chag. So maintain there's no need for that to happen. Continues the Gemara. My Talmud Beis Shammai. Why would Beis Shammai require a lishma? Amar kro chag hasukkahs shivas yomim lashem. So we learn from here that the sukkah has to be built lashem. Rashi says l'shem mitzvahs hamalach, for the sake of mitzvah. Says the Gemara, sukkah asui l'shem chag b'inan. We need a sukkah l'shem l'chag l'shem kiyum mitzvah of Yom Tov. Ubeis Hillel, what do they do with this pasuk? Home boile, it's needed for a different halacha. Look at the Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes b'shum Rabbi Akiva. Minai in la'atzei sukkah shasur and kol shivam. From where do we know that the wood, the boards of the sukkah are actually off limits? Not meant to have a no from them all throughout the 7 days of Yom Tov. Talmud Leimar, because of this pasuk, Chag HaSukkah is Shivas Yomim LaShem. And the Gemara continues, V'tanya Ridim Seira Omer. How do we see that the sukkah itself is Asur B'Hana? Because the pasuk says Chag, and Chag is referring to the Chagiga. We darshan it's referring to the Shamli Chagiga, the carbon which you bring during Yom Tov. And we say like this, that the sukkah is to be compared to that carbon. And just as the carbon is Asur B'Hana, until you do the Hakrava, in which case the Kayhanim can now have that carbon, but it's not like it's there. They're taking it from Hashem. So carbon is designated for Hashem. Just as Hashem's name, the concept of Hegdish and Isser, descends on the carbon Chagiga, Kach Shchal Shem Shemayim al Sukkah. Likewise, Shem Shemayim is applied to the Sukkah, and you must refrain from benefiting from those boards. It's off limits, it's muktzah. How do we know this? Shenemar Chag HaSukkah is Shivas Yomim Lashem. We compare the Sukkah to the Chag, Ma Chag Lashem, just as the carbon is designated exclusively Lashem, of Sukkah Lashem, likewise the Sukkah. Now Tosfos points out this is very different than the halacha of muktzah, which is a rabbinic concept discussed in Maseches Shabbos, which applies to all types of things. Here we're speaking about a din Torah of muktzah. It's set aside, it's designated for Hashem, and it's Asur B'Hana min ha-Torah. And Tosfos points out that that's only while the sukkah is still intact. Bo'eda kayemes. You can't remove some of that wood for personal use. But suppose the sukkah was nafla, collapsed. So the mitzvah now is batal. Says Tosfos, this Isser muktzah discussed in the Gemara here will no longer apply once the sukkah is no longer serving mitzvah use. However, the din muktzah midrabanan might still apply. That's a different concept. That's something which has been set aside for mitzvah use. You can't use on Shabbos or Yom Tov or throughout that. It's a different concept. He was speaking about a din Torah. And he says that's only while it's still serving mitzvah use. In addition, says Tosfos, name of Rabbeinu Tam, this Isser Muktzah Min Torah only applies to the boards which are needed, actually needed halachically for the kashrus HaSukkah, which is 2 boards and a bit, shtaim kilchasan, shlishis tefach. But the additional board material, suppose his sukkah has 4 walls, that additional material is not included in this Isser, the Isser Torah of Muktzah. So in any case, Beis Hillel used the pasuk, that pasuk which Beis Shammai used to source their halacha, that sukkah needs to be lishma. By the way, some say it's referring to the SUKKAH, and some say even the fanos of the sukkah need to be lishma according to Beis Shammai. And it's sourced in this pasuk of Chag HaSukkah Shivas Yom Lashem. That pasuk, according to Beis Hillel, is applied to the halacha of muktzah. and therefore is unavailable to teach us that you have to have lishma by sukkah. Ubei Shammai, says the Gemara, nami moile lachi. Don't Ubei Shammai also need this pasuk to teach us this halacha, that the sukkah is asur, it's hegdish, it's muktzah. Says the Gemara, Einach, you're right. Apparently they learned their halacha from a different pasuk. Elamai tamayu de Ubei Shammai. Where did they come from? We have another pasuk which says, Chaga Sukkos Tasalacha Shivas Yamim. We learn from here that the asiyah of the sukkah needs to be l'shem chag. Ha'asuyah l'shem chag, sukkah ha'asuyah l'shem chag b'ina. You need to have a sukkah which was fashioned l'shem yontiv, l'shem the mitzvah. So Rashi says we sort of switch around the words in the pasuk. It says Chag HaSukkah is taseh l'chashivas yomim. It's as though it would say Sukkah is taseh l'chag. Ubesil respond, it's coming to teach us a different halacha. Let's suppose he arrives in town, middle of Yom Tov, middle of Chag HaMoed, he has no sukkah. Can he build one now? Even though this sukkah is not really serving a 7-day dira. Yes, you can. You can make a sukkah even on Chag. Chag HaSukkah is taseh l'chag. Therefore, it's unavailable to teach us halacha of the Shema. Ubei Shammai. What about Bei Shammai? Sfira lehuk Rabbi Lezer. They hold this pasuk isn't needed to tell you that you can build one in the middle of Yom Tov, because you actually cannot. They hold like Rabbi Lezer, Damar Ein. Oisin sukkah b'chayil shamayit. You see, according to Rabbi Lezer, the sukkah needs to be a 7-day dwelling, a 7-day structure. It's either all or nothing. You can't build one in the middle of Yom Tov. So the pasuk isn't needed to allow you to build it then, because you can't. And the pasuk is available to teach us lishma. Says the Gemara, is that so? According to Beisilo, you don't need to build the sukkah l'shem mitzvah. A chevit mitzvah doesn't need to be done l'shem the mitzvah. Ubeisila less l'hu the Rav Yehuda Marav. They don't hold the Rav Yehuda Marav who tells us when it comes to other mitzvahs, for instance, tzitzis. You need to do it l'shma. You need to prepare in advance for mitzvah use. The Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda quoted Rav as follows: Os amena koitzin. He fashioned his tzitzis using koitzin. Rashi explains. Suppose the thread in the weave had snapped, and he tied it together. In which case, now you have some of these protruding ends, these loose ends from that knot. It's called koitzin. They appear like thorns. So you have some of these threads hanging out of your beged. Can you use that for tzitzis? Umin animen. Suppose he made his tzitzis using nimen, loose threads. Rashi says when he was hemming up his beged, so he had some long threads hanging down after he's done. Umin garden. Suppose you have some threads hanging down from the actual weave itself. In all these cases, psula, you can't make tzitzis from it because it's just there. He didn't actually tie the thread onto the beged l'shem tzitzis. However, min ha-sisin ksherim, if he chooses to use sisin, which are rolls of thread, spools of thread, that's okay, as long as he ties it onto the beged l'shem tzitzis. You don't need to actually spin the threads l'shma. So whose shita is this? Rabbi Yehuda was quoting Rav. The spinning doesn't need to be l'shem tzitzis, but the hanging on the beged, the tying it on the beged, that needs to be l'shma. Now Rabbi Yehuda first learned by Rav. After Rav was nifter, he went over to Shmuel. Ki amrisa kamei Shmuel. When I went to Shmuel, I presented this halacha of Rav to him. Amar, he responded, no, you have to be more machmer. Af min asisin nami psul. Even using these spools of thread is also no good. It's also possible to be in a tvil shma. You need to actually spin those threads l'shem mitzvahs tzitzis. Apparently all agree. Rab, Shmuel, you need to have asiyah l'shma by tzitzis in varying degrees. Shmuel says the spinning needs to be l'shma. Rab says as long as you tie it on the shma, it's okay. Hachinami here as well says the more by sukkah nebayis sukkah asiyah l'shma. Why don't we need to actually make the sukkah l'shem sukkahs? Why do Beis Hillel allow a sukkah yishana? Says the Gemara, Shani Hasam the Makra. Yeah, by tzitzis it's different. We have a pasuk, Dilim Tasa L'cha. We learn, L'cha L'shem Chayvach. It needs to be done for the sake of your obligation. L'shem Mitzvah Tzitzis. As opposed to Sukkahs, where that's not necessary. Hachanami here as well by Sukkahs, it also says a similar lashon. Chaga Sukkahs Tasa L'cha. L'cha L'shem Chayvach. You should need it L'shem. It needs to be done L'shem Sukkah. Says Gemara, the pasuk by Sukkahs is needed for a different halacha. To be mamayit, a sukkah which was stolen, sukkah which doesn't belong to you. That's what the pasuk meant. Chaga Sukkahs tasa lacha. It needs to be lacha, mishal cha. Can't steal somebody's sukkah and use it. But you don't need l'shma. Says Gemara, hasam nami. What about by tzitzis? Although it says Dilim Tasalacha, perhaps it's also coming to teach you Limut Exula. You can't use stolen threads, stolen tzitzis. But who says it needs to be L'Shem Mitzvah? Hasam Ksiv Karachrina. By tzitzis, we already have another source for Gazel. V'asalahem. It says V'asalahem tzitzis al kafi bigdeim, which teaches us Mishalahem. It needs to belong to them, as opposed to something stolen. So once we learn Limut Exula from that pasuk of V'asalahem, we have the other pasuk, Dilim Tasa L'cha, which is now available to tell you, L'cha, you have to make the tzitzis L'shem Chayvach, for the sake of the mitzvah. So according to Shmuel, it means spinning. According to Rav, spinning a thread isn't required. Rather, as long as he ties the tzitzis onto the beged L'shma, that is sufficient. But when it comes to Sukkah, we don't really have an extra pasuk, because when it says Chaga Sukkahs Tasa L'cha, needs to be mamayit a gazel. Asks Tosfos, why would you even need a pasuk that gazel isn't to be used for a mitzvah? Tema, it's a wonder, says Tosfos. If it's something stolen, then it's automatically unfit for mitzvah. You can't be makayim a mitzvah by way of an avera. Big Zeraya from the Gemara later in Sukkah, you can't do that. And says Tosfos, the Tama, the mitzvah haba b'avera lav d'orais el midrabanan. There's a big difference. Mitzvah haba b'avera is a rabbanon concept, and it wouldn't necessarily invalidate the mitzvah min Torah. So sure, using something which is guzzle is inappropriate. With the rabbanon, you may not do that. We're looking for a makar min Torah, which would invalidate this type of thing, and that's why we need a pasuk. Gdilim Chag Sukkahs Tasa L'cha. It has to be yours as opposed to guzzle. V'asalahem tzitzis al kafi bigdeim as opposed to a guzzle. And now we know that not only midrabanan can it be used, but even in Torah, the mitzvah is not kosher. So, conclusion: we learned about a sukkah which was fashioned l'shem chag. All agree it's fine, regardless of when it was built. Likewise, if it was built within 30 days of Yom Tov, we assume Stama Lishma, even without any explicit expression of Stama, of Lishma, all agree it's Kasha. Machlekes applies in the case where it was before Kodim Lamed Yom, so it was more than 30 days to Yom Tov, and it was done Stama. Intention unknown. Shammai say it's possible. We learn from Pasuk Chaga Sukkahs Tasa. The Asiyah needs to be L'Shem Chag. But still use that pasuk for a different halacha, which case is unavailable to teach us that a sukkah needs to be l'shem chag, and therefore we still say, as long as the sukkah presents itself like a sukkah, it appears that it's l'shem tzel, we learned yesterday, it has to be properly covered, in which case it appears that it's not just coming to afford a privacy, it's coming to actually generate shade and shelter. That's enough, even without l'shem mitzvah sukkah. Tosfos brings the Yerushalmi lechatchila. He meant to at least show some sort of indication that the sukkah is l'shem mitzvah. Continues the Mishnah on Amud Beis. If one builds his sukkah beneath a tree, that's not kosher. It's as though he built it inside his home, which is certainly possible, as we're going to see in the Gemara. What about a double sukkah? Sukkah al gabe sukkah. He built a double-decker sukkah. The bottom sukkah is also possible. The top one is fine, but the bottom one isn't. We learn this halacha from the same source as we learn the psul of a sukkah beneath a tree or under a home. Chazon Ish explains that when a sukkah is beneath another sukkah, the bottom sukkah isn't really functioning as a shade provider. It's already shady on account of the upper sukkah. And that's the svara behind the psul of sukkah tachas sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he says like this: I have one exception. Im ein diyurim bel yonim. If the upper sukkah isn't really livable, it's not really roi for dira, then we could just ignore it. In this case, the bottom sukkah is fine because it's not considered one sukkah beneath the other. Says Rashi on top, Kilu also b'seicha bayis. If you have a sukkah beneath a tree, it's as though it's in a home. Upsula, kedesanyo bebraisa b'gemara. Hatachtoin psula. This is the double-decker sukkah. The bottom one is puzzle. There's shnei schach and yeshla because it has a double schach. Ukra puzzle sukkah tachas sukkah kamon, which the pasuk tells us is puzzle. Rabbi takes exception. He says, "Ein the urine. Nobody can actually live in the upper one." Then the tachton is kasher. The Gemara mefarish. Says the Gemara Marava leishanu. This halacha that we learned in the Mishnah, that a sukkah beneath a tree is puzzle, that's only ela be'ilan shetzilosoi merubim chamasai. It's only if that tree is a proper shade provider. It provides more shade than sunlight. In which case it's considered a sichuch and interferes with the sukkah beneath it. Aval chamasai merubim tzilosoi kshera. But suppose the sukkah, the tree on top, isn't really a thick tree, in which case more sun gets through. It produces more sun than shade. Chamasai merubim tzilasei. Then the sukkah beneath it is kosher. And the chiddush here is that even if the sukkah beneath this tree needs to use that shade coming from the tree, because on its own, it's not really providing enough shade. It's only in conjunction with the shade coming from the tree on top. That's also fine, as the Gemara will explain. But first, let's prove our point. Mimai, how would you know that this is in fact true? Says Rava, Midiktani. Take a look at the Mishnah. A sukkah beneath an ilan is, Mishnah doesn't just say what it is. Kasher, puzzle. Mishnah adds a descriptive term. Kilu also b'seicha bayis. It's as though it's equated to a sukkah within a home. Kilu also b'seicha bayis. Why would the Mishnah have to describe the halacha in this fashion? This is psula. Just say straight out, this sukkah is puzzle. Because actually, as Rashi points out, the same pasuk, which teaches the psul of a sukkah inside a home, teaches us the psul of a sukkah beneath a tree. They both learn from the same makkah. So why does the Mishnah have to describe the halacha in this fashion? Sukkah beneath an ilan is like beneath a tree, like beneath a house. Ela kamash malan. Apparently, says Rav, what is the Mishnah trying to tell us? We're meant to compare the two halachas. The ilan do midabais. The halacha of the ilan is meant to be compared to the halacha of the house, which means ma bais tzilosa merubim chamasai. Just as the bais is certainly speaking, where that house provides more shade than sunlight. That's the presumption, and therefore the sukkah built inside that home is now possible. Af ilan likewise. The sukkah beneath the ilan needs to be in a case where tzilosa merubim chamasai, where that tree has enough branches to provide more shade than sunlight. And only then do we say the sukkah beneath it is possible, because the area has been fully covered by that tree, which makes the sukkah beneath it obsolete. However, says Rav, suppose this tree is sparsely branched, not really providing much shade. The sukkah beneath it can use the sail coming from the ilan above it for its own use, and the sukkah is kosher, despite the fact that he's sitting under a tree. Says the Gemara, 1 second. How could that happen? How could he use shade of a tree which is puzzle? A tree is mechubel karka. It's unfit for schach. How could you be mitzaref the sail coming from the tree above to the sukkah below? What good is it if the tree is not really an adequate shade provider. It allows more sun than shade. My havi. So what? Why does that make it any better? At the end of the day, how come it's started with schach posel? But this schach kasher, isn't he trying to combine, to connect the schach posel of the ilan with the schach kasher of the sukkah? You cannot use a shade coming from a tree for your sukkah. Amar Papa B'Shel Chavta was speaking that he was mashpil the anafim. He bent down those branches. He lowered them down till he got to the schach. And he mixed it up there. In which case now, the schach pasal of that tree is batal. In the roiv of the schach kasher, in which case now everything is fine. It can be used for your sukkah. Let's go over to Rashi, 3 lines from the top. So Rabbi presents a chiddush. The din of sukkah tachas ilan is only when the ilan is a shade provider. But if the ilan itself doesn't really provide adequate shade, then the sukkah beneath it can use some of that shade for itself to be marshal on the shear of the tzeil that the sukkah needs, and the sukkah itself is kosher. Says Rashi, because why? Otherwise, why would the Mishnah have to present the psul of sukkah tachas ilan in a way of an equation? It's as though he did it in a house. The same place we learned the halach of techabayis, we learned the halach of tachas ilan. Why would you have to make one dependent on the other? The Mishnah is teaching us a chiddush. Tachas ilan is only concerned if that ilan presents like a bayis, provides more shade than sunlight. But otherwise, it wouldn't really invalidate the sukkah. In fact, the sukkah can actually utilize the tzel coming from that schach for itself. How could that happen, says Rashi? How come mitzvah schach pasel? How could you be mitzvah schach pasel with a schach kosher? Mechuber is schach pasel. How do we know? D'chsiv ba'aspecha migarnecha mikvecha. The psukim by sukkahs related to the time when you gather, you produce. We learn from there that you meant to fashion your sukkah, your schach, from the farm waste, the pseilas goyim, the remnants of the goyim of the grain kigon kashem, for instance, stalks, pseilas yekev, the remnants of your vineyard kigon eshkolos rakanis, emptied vines, empties clusters of grapes, of the branches, uzmoiras and the vine branches. Almatolosh b'ina. It's pretty clear. You need to have detached schach. In this case, you're saying that you're using the tzel of the ilan for your sukkah. Mahani tzel ilan l'tzel schach. La'ashlam tzilas l'shel sukkah. How could you do that? Continues Rashi b'shechavta. Hishpila nafach lamat. V'irvan is a gersa v'irvan. So you brought down the branches, mixed it up in schach kasher. You no longer tell them apart, so it's bottled, it's mixed up. Uschach kasher rabba olav. There's more schach kasher and schach pasel. Umevatla, in which case it becomes bottled. Says Rashi de midayraisa kol milu bottle ruba. When a Torah, anything can be bottle b'roiv. Because namas nisin im hoyes sichach murum and ksher. We're going to see soon. The Gemara will quote that mission Daf Aleph that there's more schach kasher and schach pasel. Then it's kosher because schach pasel is bottle b'roiv. So once again, Rabbi tells us if the ilan isn't really a shade provider, it's chamasa murum tzilasa, you have no problem being mitzaref the schach of that ilan, which is really pasel, just learned in Rashi, to the schach of the sukkah. You make a bit of a roiv, in which case now the sukkah is kosher. Says the Gemara further, if you did that, you pushed it down, you mixed it up, then why even discuss it? It's pashut. What's the chiddush? That it's good. Why would Rav have to explain it? Why would the Mishnah have to hint it in its words? Isn't this a simple halacha? That schach pasel, which is mixed with schach kasher, is batal. Now you have a kasher sukkah. Says the Gemara, perhaps it would be a concern. Ma'od tema, perhaps I would think nigzar, we should apply a gzero, should be concerned to allow this on account of the fact that it might lead to a michshal. Nigzar hechad chavtan. We shouldn't allow a case of chavtan. Chavta meaning he lowered it and mixed it together. Hey, atu heichad loy chavtan on account. It might lead to do it even without chavtan, in which case you have two distinct portion of schach, one on top which is puzzle, bottom which is kosher, in which case you can't be mashir your sukkah. So perhaps one thing might lead to the next. Kamashmon, like as we know, the chiddush here is that there's no such zera. Says the Gemara, that's also self-understood. We already learned that in the Mishnah, that we're not chayshish, one on account of the other. Hanami Tanina, Mishnah says, he took some vine branches and spread it over the sukkah and to be used as schach. Vine is connected, it's not kosher for schach. Vesa dalas, or some pumpkin leaves, vesa kisus, some other plant, perhaps this is ivy. So he takes this plant and drapes it over his sukkah. Even if he puts schach above that, it's possible because his sukkah is getting its shade from the schach possible. However, says the Mishnah, but suppose there was more schach kasher there than schach possible. So now the schach possible is batal b'roiv. Oisha cuts its on kshera, or he happened to snip off the branches from the ground, in which case now it is kasher schach, then you're okay. Hey Chidami, what is the Mishnah speaking about when we say that if there's more schach kasher than possible, it's okay? We're speaking that he hadn't mixed it together. How come it's tarev? Schach possible, schach kasher. How could that be fine? How could you combine this plant, which is still connected to the ground, with schach kasher? You can't do that. And apparently he did mix it together. We see clearly from the Mishnah, we're not concerned that perhaps next time he'll do it even without mixing it together. So it's a Mishnah. Why would Rava have to teach it to us again here? Why would the Mishnah by us have to present the same halach? Says the Rama with the Tzema, perhaps I would think, this heter of chavtan, of bitul b'roiv, that's only after the fact. He already did it. He already built a sukkah. It's done. But to allow it initially, perhaps that you can do, because we don't want to get involved in confusing situations. He might do it this way today, but differently tomorrow. Kamash Malon. Therefore, our Mishnah and Rava come and teach us, no, there's no concern. It's pretty clear. It's only mutter when he's chayvit, when he mixes it together. We're not concerned that next time he'll do it differently. Interesting that having built his sukkah is called b'di'evet. He hadn't yet eaten in the sukkah. It's not like we're making him redo his meal. He built a sukkah, it's Erev Sukkahs, we say b'di'evet, it's good. It's a chiddush that even this is considered b'di'evet, we don't require a redo. Now there are a couple of kashas in our Gemara. First of all, so we learned that you can take something which is puzzle and mix it in with something which is kosher and say bitul b'roiv. Ask the Mefarshim, we know there's a halacha of ein mevatlan isser lechatchila. I'm to take isser and initially be mevatlan and heter, to turn that isser into heter. So why in this case do we allow bitul b'roiv with this schach puzzle? There are various tirutzim. The Taz says like this: you're not being mevatal isser. A tree is isser. Nothing wrong with it. So happens to be that it's not fit for schach use. So what? Says the Taz. At this point, it's not something which is asr, which is being turned into heter. You're mixing this type of branch with this type of branch and producing a schach. It so happens to be that a day later it's sukkahs, and you're going to eat in the sukkah, and not going to be doing an isser of eating outside the sukkah. Therefore, says the Taz, there's no concern of ein mevatlan isser lechatchila. Now it's interesting, there's a long thesis on the right side here, and it begins with a chiddush. It's actually mashma Rashi as well, as follows: that when we say that an ilan, which is chamasa meruba mitzilasa, can theoretically be incorporated into the schach by way of the chavtan process, but otherwise, if the tree is still hanging where it is, separate from the sukkah, then we say the sukkah is possible because you're benefiting from the schach puzzle above it. That's only, says Taisus, when the sukkah itself needs that schach. It needs the tzeil coming from the tree. But suppose the sukkah is mesuchechas kilchasa. It's tzilosa merubah mechamasa independent of the tree above it. He doesn't need the tree above it. In that case, says Tosfos, it will be fully kosher, even if the tree remains in position. No chavtan, no bittul, because the sukkah itself cannot be affected by the tree above it, because the sukkah itself doesn't need that tree. He's a fine sukkah without him. And the tree itself is not really a shade provider. It's only chamasa merubah mitzilasa. In which case, it does not affect it. The sukkah, and sukkah is kosher. The Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rosh brings him, he says, even in this case, the schach pasal of that tree will invalidate the sukkah because, says Rabbi Yehuda, the tree is providing shade. So although he's not really a significant shade provider, it's only chamas merubah mitzilasa, but at the end of the day, underneath that branch is shady. So the schach on the sukkah, directly beneath that branch, isn't really functioning as schach. It's obsolete. It's not really needed. It's very shady on account of the tree. Says Rav Yehuda, if so, that tree is going to invalidate the schach beneath it. So, in a case where you have a sukkah which is tzilas merubah chamasa, sitting underneath a tree which is only chamasa, merubah mitzilasa. So again, the sukkah is tzilas merubah chamasa and the tree is chamasa merubah. According to Tosfos, and it's mashma from Rashi as well, sukkah remains kosher. According to Rav Yehuda, the sukkah can adversely affect, the tree can adversely affect the sukkah even in this case. Continues the Gemara, sukkah al gabi sukkah. So the Mishnah presented three cases which are very similar in nature. A sukkah beneath a house, beneath a tree, a sukkah beneath another sukkah. All three cases are puzzle. How do we know? Tana Rabbanan. But sukkah is Teishu Shivas Yamim. We learn from here, V'loi b'sukkah shetachas ha-sukkah. Meant to sit in a sukkah, as opposed to a sukkah built beneath another one. V'loi b'sukkah shetachas ha-ilan. Or a sukkah beneath a tree. V'loi b'sukkah shebasech habayis. Or inside your home. Explains the Pnei Yeshua and the Chassam Sofer. It's really one and the same. The concept is the same along all three cases. The point is, you're meant to sit in a sukkah whose schach is the one providing the shade, as opposed to a case where a sukkah is already within a shady structure. And here we have three chidushim. Not only within a bayis, which is a proper shade provider, that can passel a sukkah within it and render it obsolete and useless. Even a tree does the same. And here comes the chiddush. Even under another sukkah, perhaps you'll think, that's a sukkah, and I'm a sukkah. Why would the top sukkah passel the bottom one? Here's the chiddush. No. Even in this case, the fact is the bottom sukkah isn't really providing shade, because the makam is being tended to by the top sukkah, which is a real shade provider. And therefore, in that case as well, it's possible. And all this is learned from Basukkah is Teshu. Meant to sit in a sukkah which provides shade, as opposed to a sukkah being covered by something else. Adarabba, just the opposite. Basukkah is Tarti Mashma. You read the pasuk, Basukkah is Teshu Shivas Yam, which is Mashma, that even if you have two sukkahs, you're okay. A sukkah within a sukkah. Now, the Gemara doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a double sukkah. But how can you say a double sukkah is possible? If the pasuk seems to say that a double sukkah is fine. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Take a look at the spelling. Basukkahs ksiv. You read it Basukkahs, but it's spelled without the vav. Singular, lashon yachid. You want to sit in a sukkah which is an independent structure, rather than a sukkah within another sukkah, within a house, etc. Tosfos 2 lines from the bottom asks a kasha. We're working with the spelling, Basukkahs ksiv, although back on Daf Vav, we had some shitas which held Yesh Eim Mikra. A drasha would focus on the reading of the word, rather than the spelling. Says Tosfos, all agree that Loi Lechinam Nichtav HaMaseres. Must be a reason why the pasuk is meant to be spelled in this manner. So it's not meant to be ignored at all altogether. Memela, says the Gemara, we do learn something from there as well. Although that's not the primary focus when it comes to drashis. But at the end of the day, the pasuk is spelled in this fashion, with a message for us that it has to be in a single sukkah as opposed to a sukkah within another. Rabbi Yirmiyah, I'm going to give you a list, a chart. Interesting, that Rabbi Yirmiyah is over here, he's in B'Matzian HaMafkid, in Mesachas Shavuos. He would present a full equation, all different types of applications for this halacha, for this concept. Rabbi Yirmiyah, Pa'amim, at times you can have a double-decker sukkah, and both are fine. Sheshtein ksheris. Pa'amim, at times, sheshneim psulis. A sukkah on top of a sukkah, both are pasl. Pa'amim, at times you'll have shetachtoinik kshera, the bottom one is fine. V'olyoin psula, the top one is pasl. And finally, pa'amim shetachtoinik psula, the bottom one would be pasl. V'olyoin kshera, the top one is fine. So we have 4 cases regarding a sukkah tachas a sukkah. Sometimes both are fine, sometimes both are pasl. Sometimes the bottom was kosher, and at times only the top one is kosher. And he explained as follows: when do we have both sukkahs to be kosher? Suppose you have a double-decker sukkah whose bottom level, lower level, doesn't have enough schach on its own to create proper shade. In which case, the bottom sukkah isn't really a sukkah. Halachically, it's not regarded as a sukkah. And the upper level has enough shade, has a proper schach. And the upper sukkah, meaning the schach of the upper sukkah, is within 20 to the ground below. So now everything is fine, because technically it's really only one sukkah. Right? The lower level isn't really a sukkah because it doesn't have enough schach on its own. He needs the upper level to make him into a sukkah. So it's really one sukkah. And since it's within 20 to the ground below, within the required shear, you have one sukkah which is kosher. You can sit on top, you can sit on bottom, they're both kosher. So that's the first case. Pa'amim sheshtein ksheres. Continues the Gemara further. Pa'amim sheshtein psules. Heichidam. When is it that both levels will be possible? Ki goin de tarvayu tziloson merubim chamasim. Both levels have proper shade. Both schachas of both sukkahs provide more shade than sunlight. In which case, both are considered a sukkah. So the bottom one is no good because he's a sukkah under a sukkah. What about the upper sukkah? What's wrong with that? What happened was that he built the upper level too high, too tall. The schach of the upper sukkah is beyond 20 amma of what? Of the lower schach, of the roof of the bottom sukkah. See, the bottom sukkah provides a floor. He's like a karka because he's a proper schach. So we measure the 20 amma from there. And since the schach of the upper level is beyond 20, beyond reach, beyond Esra Mama, so the upper sukkah is puzzle, and certainly the bottom one is puzzle because he's beneath another sukkah. When is it that the bottom one is good but the top one isn't? The bottom sukkah is sparsely covered. But at the end of the day, when combining the tzeil coming from the upper level, the bottom sukkah will have more tzeil than chama. So now he's fine. And the upper one is not properly covered. His schach is barely schach. He allows more sunlight than shade. In which case, as far as the bottom sukkah is concerned, the top schach is non-existent, meaning you don't have to reckon with it. It's not proper schach. The bottom sukkah isn't sitting under a sukkah. A sukkah means schach, a shade provider. The top one isn't providing enough shade. So halachically, it's not a sukkah. So now the bottom one can use that sail, the shade coming from the upper schach, and incorporate it into his own shade, in which case the bottom sukkah is properly shaded. One more thing, the kaimi tarvayu b'sei chesed. This is only provided that both levels are situated within 20 amma to the ground below. Why do we need this condition? Because suppose the upper sukkah would stretch above 20, then that schach sitting above the upper sukkah, even though it's just chamasa, merubim tzilas, just a little bit of schach, it's going to be schach pasel. In which case, the bottom sukkah, which apparently isn't properly covered yet, he needs that schach. He needs to incorporate that shade into his own schach. Will now become possible because that schach above 20 is beyond 20, it's schach pasel. So once again, we speak that the bottom one is perfectly shaded. In conjunction, by mimitzaref, by incorporating the shade coming from the top sukkah, which isn't really properly covered, so it's not really a proper sukkah. So the bottom one is. The top one isn't. So the bottom one is not a sukkah tachas a sukkah. There's no sukkah above it. On the other hand, he can use the schach coming from the top one because the top one schach isn't beyond 20. It's within 20 to the ground, so it's schach kasher. And therefore it could be included in the sale of the lower sukkah. The fourth case is at times you can have the upper sukkah be kasher and the bottom level pasel. How's that? Kigoin the tarvayu tziloson miruba mechamasan. Both sukkahs are properly covered, properly shaded. Each one independently has enough schach to provide more shade than sun. Problem is that the top sukkah is within 20 to the roof of the lower level. So actually that's the reason why the top one is kosher, right? It's within 20 to the lower level. So the top one is fine. And he's within range, he's within the shear of Esrim Amma. Because his schach is within 20 Amma of the roof of the lower level, which is for him a floor. Right? Since the bottom sukkah is properly covered with schach, it's like a karka, it's like a oretz. And that presents as a karka, as the floor of the upper sukkah. In which case, if the upper sukkah is within 20 to that floor, he's fine. So the Elyon is certainly fine. However, the tachtoin is possible. Why? Pashut, because he's a sukkah, tachas a sukkah. Okay, let's just summarize before we continue. So we have a drasha basukas teishu. Since it's spelled basukas, we learned that it has to be a single entity, as opposed to a sukkah beneath an ilan, beneath a bayis, or beneath another sukkah. Rabbi tells us we actually have 4 categories. Sometimes both sukkahs, speaking about a double-decker sukkah, both will be kosher. That's going to be a case where the tachtoina is chamasa merub mitzilasa, doesn't really have proper shade on its own, and it's using the shade coming from the upper sukkah. The upper sukkah is tzilasa meruba, and that schach of the Elyon is within 20 amma of the oretz below. So now it's just one structure, one sukkah, and everything is kosher. When do we have both pasel? When both sukkahs, both levels, have proper schach, tzilasa merub mechamosa. And the bottom one is now a sukkah beneath a sukkah. The top one is also pasel because we're speaking that its schach was built beyond 20 amma of the gag, of the schach of the lower level. So that sukkah is beyond 20. The Malam Esrim Amma is pasel. Next case was Tachtoines Kshera B'Tel Yoines Psula. We're speaking where the lower level has enough shade when being combined with this shade coming from the Elyon. Now, since the Elyon is only Chamasa Merubim Tzilasa, it's not really an adequate shade provider. It's not considered halakha like a sukkah. So that allows the lower level to be a good sukkah, because he's not a sukkah beneath a sukkah. So the Tachton is kosher. However, the Elyon is possible because he doesn't have enough shade. And we're speaking that the schach of the upper one is within 20 amma to the ground below, in which case technically that schach is kosher, and therefore it doesn't invalidate the sukkah beneath it. And finally we have a case where the Elyon is kosher but not the tachtoina, where both sukkahs have enough shade. Tzilasa merubim chamasa. In which case the bottom one is now beneath a sukkah. Sukkah tachas a sukkah, it's possible. The upper one is fine because it has enough shade, and its schach was positioned within 20 amma to its floor being the roof of the lower level sukkah. So now the upper sukkah is perfectly fine. Says the Gemara, why did Rav Yirmiyah have to go through this extensive list? Are there any chidushim here? All the various cases seem to be simply variations of the same concept. Pshita, says the Gemara, isn't this pashut? No, there is a chiddush here. A chiddush which applies to the second to the last case that we mentioned. Tachtoinik shira, v'al psulit strichle. There was a chiddush here. Rav Yirmiyah felt a need to present that halach. Again, we're speaking that the lower level has proper shade because he is using the shade coming from the Elyoina. And we're speaking that the Elyoina was built within 20 amma, meaning the schach of the Elyon, which isn't really proper shade, just a chamasa merubim tzilasa, is within 20 amma to the ground below. So the Elyon is possible. Doesn't have enough shade. The tachtin is kosher because although he himself is not shaded enough, but he's going to use the shade coming from the Elyoina, which is chach kosher because it's within 20. It's trichle. That was a chiddush. Why? Perhaps I'll be concerned that this might lead to something else which is not kosher. Nigzer, I'll apply gzera. I'll be concerned for thou this to happen. What do you mean this? We're allowed to use the schach of the upper level because it's within 20 and it's really schach kosher. We're going to use that to be mashlam the sale of the lower sukkah. Perhaps next time he's going to apply this principle even when the schach of the upper level is beyond 20 and it's possible. He won't differentiate. Dibum mitzvah of schach pasul by the schach kosher. Next time he might say, okay, last time in my lower level I was able to incorporate a schach coming from the Elyon, which wasn't really proper schach, it was chamasa merubim tzilasa. So I did it last time. Let me do it again now. Even though this time, big difference because the schach of the upper level is beyond 20 of the tachton. In which case that schach is pasul. He won't differentiate. Dilba mitzvah schach pasul by schach kosher. Kamash malon. That's the chiddush of Yirmiyah. We're not concerned. He will tell them apart. He'll realize last time I did it because the upper schach was positioned within 20 to the aretz, in which case it was schach kosher and could be combined with the schach of the tachtin to create a sukkah kshera on bottom. Whereas this time, when the schach elyon is beyond 20, it's really schach pasul. I should not go ahead and combine it with the schach of the tachtin. Okay, let's just review quickly. We began with the halacha of sukkah l'shma. We had 3 cases. If he did it l'shem chag, he was mefarish l'shem chag, then regardless of when it was built, whether before sukkahs, even a year ago, it's certainly fine. If it's within 30 days of Yom Tov, even stama is okay. If it's more than 30 days before Yom Tov, Rishamim maintain, unless it's done l'shem sukkah, it's possible. Pasuk says chag sukkah tasa l'shem chag. They still maintain there's no need to make it l'shem sukkah. All agree when it comes to tzitzis, you need l'shma. We have a pasuk which says Gedilim tasa l'cha l'shem chayvach. According to Rav, tying it onto the bag l'shma is enough. According to Shmuel, even the spinning process needs to be l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. We learned about a sukkah tachas ilan, and we had a chiddush in the Gemara that at times even a sukkah beneath the tree is kosher. For instance, in the case where the ilan isn't really a shade provider, it's chamasa merubim tzilasa and chavtan. He lowered the branches into the tzach kosher and he mixed it together. And the chiddush was that you could do it even lechatchila. We're not geyser that perhaps next time he'll do it without mixing it together. Another case where a tree would not interfere is what Tosfos says, that if the sukkah itself is properly shaded, then this tree which has more sun than shade, even if it's above that sukkah, will not invalidate the sukkah. The Brisa teaches us, by sukkahs, meant to sit in a single structure, as opposed to a sukkah beneath another one, beneath a tree, or in a house. And Rabbi Yirmiyah concluded the Gemara with 4 cases. Avi double decker or sukkah. Haslacha Rabban kol tov to you.